The small town of Riverside had only one music school, and it stood at the corner of Main Street like a proud old building that had seen many years pass by. The school was famous for producing talented musicians, and parents from all around dreamed of sending their children there. But there was something about this school that not everyone knew. Behind its beautiful walls and shining pianos, there lived a teacher whose heart had grown cold over the years. Mrs. Blackwood had been teaching piano at Riverside Music Academy for 25 years. She came from a family of famous musicians, and her own career had ended too soon because of an injury to her hand. This had left her bitter and angry at the world. She believed that only children from wealthy families with proper musical backgrounds deserved to learn piano. Poor children, in her mind, were wasting everyone's time. On a rainy September morning, a little girl named Lily walked through the doors of the music school for the first time. She was only 8 years old, with long black hair tied in 2 braids and eyes that sparkled with hope and wonder. Her clothes were simple and slightly worn, showing that her family did not have much money. Her mother, a single parent who worked 2 jobs to make ends meet, held her hand tightly. Lily had never touched a real piano in her life. Her family could not afford one, but every night she would draw piano keys on a piece of cardboard and practice moving her fingers across them while listening to classical music on an old radio. She had memorized the sounds of hundreds of songs, imagining what it would feel like to create such beautiful music with her own hands. Her mother had saved money for 3 years to afford the school fees. She believed in her daughter's dream more than anything else in the world. When they reached the reception desk, the woman there looked at them with a mix of curiosity and judgment. Their clothes made it clear they were not like the other families who usually came here. The receptionist called Mrs. Blackwood to come and meet the new student. When the teacher arrived, she looked at Lily and her mother from head to toe. Her eyes showed no warmth, only cold assessment. She noticed the worn shoes, the simple dress, and the nervousness in the mother's eyes. Mrs. Blackwood asked in a sharp voice where Lily had studied music before. The mother explained softly that Lily had never had formal training, but she had a natural love for piano music. She mentioned how Lily would practice on cardboard keys every single day without fail. This answer made Mrs. Blackwood laugh, but it was not a kind laugh. It was the sound of someone who thought she had heard the most foolish thing in the world. The teacher told them that music was not for everyone. She said it required breeding, background, and proper upbringing. She looked directly at Lily and said that children who practiced on cardboard could never understand the soul of real music. But the school had a policy of accepting all students who paid the fees, so she had no choice but to take Lily into her class. Lily felt her heart sink at the teacher's words, but she did not cry. She simply squeezed her mother's hand and promised herself that she would prove this woman wrong. Her mother bent down and whispered in her ear that some people only see what is on the outside, but true talent comes from the heart. Lily nodded and walked into the classroom with her head held high. The classroom was filled with children from wealthy families. They sat at beautiful grand pianos, their fingers moving gracefully across the keys. They wore expensive clothes and had the confidence of those who had never known struggle. When Lily walked in, they all turned to look at her. Some whispered to each other, pointing at her simple appearance. Mrs. Blackwood introduced Lily to the class in a way that made everyone laugh. She said that they had a special student today who had learned piano on cardboard. The children giggled, and Lily felt her face turn red with embarrassment. But she remembered her mother's words and stood still, refusing to let them see her pain. The teacher assigned Lily to an old piano in the corner of the room. It was the piano that nobody wanted to use because some of its keys were slightly damaged. Mrs. Blackwood said this piano was perfect for someone who was used to cardboard. The other students laughed again, enjoying the entertainment at Lily's expense. For the first few weeks, Mrs. Blackwood ignored Lily completely. She spent all her time with the wealthy students, praising their efforts and correcting their mistakes with patience. But whenever she looked at Lily, her eyes showed only disgust. She never offered help or guidance. She simply waited for Lily to fail so she could prove her point about poor children not belonging in the world of music. Lily struggled at first. Her fingers were not used to real piano keys, and the sounds she produced were clumsy and rough. The other students made fun of her behind her back, calling her names and laughing at her mistakes. But every day, after everyone left, Lily would stay behind and practice alone for hours. She would close her eyes and let the music guide her, learning from her mistakes and growing stronger with each passing day. Her mother would pick her up late in the evening, finding her daughter still at the old piano, her small fingers dancing across the keys with determination. Sometimes Lily would be so tired that she would fall asleep on the way home, but she never complained, and she never asked to quit. The dream in her heart was bigger than any obstacle in her path. Mrs. Blackwood watched this from a distance, and something about Lily's determination bothered her. She had expected the girl to give up within the first week. She had seen many children from poor families come and go, broken by the harsh reality of not fitting in. But this little girl was different. She kept coming back, day after day, refusing to accept defeat. The teacher decided that she needed to do something more to break this child's spirit. If Lily would not quit on her own, then Mrs. Blackwood would find a way to make her leave. She began planning something that would humiliate Lily in front of everyone and finally prove that poor children had no place in her classroom. What she did not know was that her cruel plan would soon reveal something that nobody expected, something that would change everything. The autumn leaves began to fall outside the music school, and inside its walls, a storm was quietly brewing. Lily continued to practice on her old piano in the corner, unaware of what her teacher was planning. The other students continued to ignore her, treating her like she was invisible. But Lily did not mind being invisible. She had her music, and that was enough for now. Every night at home, she would tell her mother about the beautiful songs she was learning. Her eyes would light up as she described the melodies, and her fingers would move through the air as if playing an invisible piano. Her mother would listen with tears in her eyes, proud of her daughter's courage and worried about the challenges she faced. The music school held a winter concert every year, where students would perform in front of their families and important people from the town. It was the biggest event of the year, and every student dreamed of being chosen to perform. Mrs. Blackwood had already decided which students would play, and Lily's name was nowhere on the list. The teacher smiled to herself, thinking that this would be the perfect opportunity to finally crush the little girl's dreams forever. The weeks passed slowly as winter approached Riverside. The music school became busier than ever as students prepared for the annual concert. The halls were filled with the sounds of practicing pianos, violins, and other instruments. Everyone was excited about the big event, everyone except Lily, who knew she would never be given a chance to perform. Mrs. Blackwood announced the names of the students who would perform at the concert during one of her classes. She read out each name with pride, describing what piece they would play and how wonderful they would sound. When she finished the list, she looked directly at Lily with a cold smile. She said nothing needed to be said. Lily understood perfectly. But something unexpected happened the very next day. The mayor of Riverside announced that a famous music critic from the city would be attending the winter concert. This critic, Mr. Alexander, was known throughout the country for discovering young musical talents. Any child he noticed could become famous overnight. His presence would make this concert the most important one in the school's history. Mrs. Blackwood was overjoyed at first. This was her chance to show the world what her wealthy students could do. But then, a terrible thought crossed her mind. What if her best students made mistakes? What if they were not impressive enough? She needed to make sure that her students looked even better by comparison to someone else. Her eyes fell on Lily, who was quietly practicing in her corner as usual. A wicked idea formed in her mind. She would force Lily to perform at the concert, but not to help her. She would make Lily play a piece that was far too difficult for her level, ensuring that the little girl would fail miserably in front of everyone. After Lily's embarrassing performance, her wealthy students would shine even brighter. The next morning, Mrs. Blackwood called Lily to the front of the class. She announced in a sweet voice that she had decided to give Lily a special opportunity. She said Lily would perform at the winter concert, and the piece she would play was Chopin's Ballade, one of the most challenging piano pieces ever written. The other students gasped. They knew this piece was extremely difficult, even for advanced players. For Lily, who had only been learning for a few months, it was impossible. Lily felt her heart race with fear and confusion. She did not understand why the teacher was suddenly giving her this chance. She wanted to refuse, but something inside her told her not to give up. She looked at Mrs. Blackwood and quietly accepted the challenge. The teacher smiled, thinking that the trap had been set perfectly. The other students whispered among themselves after class. Some felt sorry for Lily, knowing she was being set up for failure. Others were excited to see her embarrass herself on the big stage. A few of them even started making jokes about what would happen when Lily forgot the notes or made terrible mistakes in front of the famous critic. That evening, Lily went home with the sheet music for Chopin's Ballade. When her mother saw the piece, her face went pale. She knew enough about music to understand how difficult it was. She asked Lily why the teacher had given her such a hard piece. Lily explained what had happened, and her mother's eyes filled with anger and sadness. Her mother wanted to go to the school and complain, but Lily stopped her. She said that running away was not the answer. If she quit now, everyone would always believe that poor children could not succeed. She wanted to try, even if she failed. Her mother held her tight and promised to support her no matter what happened. From that day on, Lily practiced like never before. She woke up at 5 in the morning and practiced on her cardboard piano at home, memorizing every note of the difficult piece. Then she went to school and practiced on the old piano in the corner until late evening. Her fingers ached, and her eyes grew tired, but she never stopped. The school janitor, an old man named Mr. Wilson, noticed Lily's dedication. He had worked at the music school for 30 years and had seen many students come and go, but he had never seen anyone practice with such passion and determination. He would often stay late just to listen to her play, and he noticed something special about the way she approached the music. One evening, Mr. Wilson approached Lily after everyone had left. He told her that he had once been a piano tuner for a famous concert hall in the city. He had heard thousands of pianists in his lifetime, and he could tell that Lily had something rare. He said that most musicians played with their fingers, but she played with her soul. He encouraged her to trust herself and let the music flow naturally. His words gave Lily new hope. She realized that she had been so focused on hitting the right notes that she had forgotten why she loved music in the first place. She started approaching the piece differently, not just as a technical challenge, but as a story to be told through her fingers. Meanwhile, Mrs. Blackwood watched Lily's progress with growing concern. She had expected the girl to break down and quit after seeing how difficult the piece was. Instead, Lily seemed to be getting better every day. The teacher started finding excuses to interrupt Lily's practice, assigning her extra cleaning duties, and making her stay after class for imaginary violations of school rules. But nothing could stop Lily. When she could not practice at school, she practiced at home on her cardboard keys. When her fingers were too tired to move, she would close her eyes and practice in her mind, hearing every note perfectly in her imagination. The music had become a part of her, living inside her heart. The other students began to notice the change in Lily. Her playing, which had once been rough and clumsy, was becoming smoother and more confident. Some of them started to feel uncomfortable, wondering if they had misjudged her. A few even felt guilty for making fun of her all these months. One student, named the daughter of a wealthy businessman, approached Lily one day during lunch. Was one of the best students in the class and had always ignored Lily before, but she had been watching Lily practice, and she was impressed by what she saw. She told Lily that she thought it was unfair what Mrs. Blackwood was doing. She offered to help Lily with some difficult passages in the piece. Lily was surprised by this unexpected kindness. She had spent months feeling alone, with only her mother and Mr. Wilson supporting her. Now, for the first time, one of her classmates was reaching out. She accepted his offer, and the two girls began practicing together after school. Was amazed by Lily's natural ability. She noticed that Lily could hear a melody once and remember it perfectly. She could feel the emotion in the music and translate it through her fingers in ways that had never seen before. Realized that Lily was not just a good student, she was a genuine talent. News of their friendship spread through the school, and Mrs. Blackwood was furious. She called to her office and warned her to stay away from Lily. She said that was risking her own reputation by associating with someone so beneath her, but refused to listen. For the first time in her life, she stood up against the teacher she had always obeyed. The winter concert was now just 2 weeks away. The whole town was buzzing with excitement about the famous critic's visit. Posters were put up everywhere, and tickets sold out within days. Everyone wanted to see what would happen at the most important musical event in Riverside's history. Lily practiced harder than ever, determined to prove that dreams could come true for anyone, rich or poor. She thought about all the children like her who had been told they were not good enough. She wanted to show them that talent had no price tag and that hard work could overcome any obstacle. Her mother watched with pride and worry. She knew her daughter was pushing herself to the limit. Every night, she would massage Lily's tired fingers and tell her stories about great musicians who had overcome hardship to achieve their dreams. These stories gave Lily strength to continue when her body wanted to give up. The day of the concert was approaching fast, and the town of Riverside held its breath in anticipation. Nobody knew that this night would become legendary, a night that would be talked about for generations to come. A night when a little girl with cardboard dreams would face her greatest challenge and discover her true destiny. The day before the concert arrived with cold winds and gray skies. Lily stood outside the music school, looking up at the building that had brought her so much pain and so much hope. Tomorrow would decide everything. Tomorrow, she would either prove herself or fail in front of the entire town. Inside the school, preparations were in full swing. Workers decorated the main hall with flowers and lights. A beautiful grand piano was brought in specially for the occasion. It was the finest instrument Lily had ever seen, with polished black wood and keys that seemed to glow under the lights. She stared at it with wonder, knowing that tomorrow she would play on this magnificent instrument for the first time. Mrs. Blackwood was everywhere, giving orders and making sure everything was perfect. When she saw Lily looking at the grand piano, she walked over with her usual cold expression. She reminded Lily that tomorrow's performance would show everyone where she truly belonged. She said that some people were born to play beautiful music, while others were born to listen from the outside. Lily did not respond. She simply turned and walked away, saving her energy for what mattered. That night Lily could not sleep. She lay in her small bed, staring at the ceiling and running through the entire piece in her mind. Her fingers moved under the blanket, pressing invisible keys. She thought about her mother, who had worked so hard to give her this chance. She thought about Mr. Wilson, and who had believed in her when no one else did. She could not let them down. Her mother came into her room around midnight. She sat on the edge of the bed and held Lily's hand. She told her daughter that no matter what happened tomorrow, she was already proud of her. She said that Lily had already achieved something amazing just by refusing to give up. These words brought tears to Lily's eyes, and she finally fell asleep, feeling loved and protected. The morning of the concert dawned bright and cold. The sun shone through the frost on the windows, creating patterns of light that danced across Lily's room. She woke up early and got dressed in the simple white dress her mother had bought especially for this day. It was not expensive like the dresses other girls would wear, but it was clean and beautiful in its simplicity. Her mother helped her braid her hair and tied a small ribbon at the end. They looked at each other in the mirror, and both smiled despite their nervousness. They ate a small breakfast together, but neither of them could eat much. The excitement and fear were too great. When they arrived at the music school, the parking lot was already filling with cars. Expensive vehicles lined up one after another, carrying families dressed in their finest clothes. Lily and her mother walked past them, receiving curious looks and whispered comments, but they held their heads high and walked through the front doors with dignity. The main hall looked even more beautiful than the day before. Hundreds of chairs were arranged in neat rows, facing the stage where the grand piano stood majestically. Flowers decorated every corner, and the chandeliers sparkled with golden light. It was like stepping into a fairy tale, except this fairy tale had villains who wore expensive perfume and fake smiles. Mrs. Blackwood was greeting guests at the entrance. When she saw Lily arrive, her smile became even wider but colder. She reminded Lily that she would be performing first, before all the other students. She said this was a great honor, but Lily knew the truth. Going first meant she would set the lowest bar for others to surpass. It meant her inevitable failure would make everyone else look better. The famous music critic, Mr. Alexander, arrived in a black car that made everyone turn and stare. He was a tall man with gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. He walked into the hall with confidence, greeting Mrs. Blackwood politely but without warmth. He had seen many schools like this, and he had little patience for pretense. Mr. took his seat in the front row, directly facing the stage. He pulled out a small notebook and pen, ready to take notes on the performances. The other guests settled into their seats, whispering about which students they expected to impress the great critic. Nobody mentioned Lily. To them, she was already forgotten. Backstage, the students waited nervously for the concert to begin. The wealthy children were surrounded by their parents, receiving last-minute encouragement and adjustments to their outfits. Lily sat alone in a corner, her mother having been asked to wait in the audience with everyone else. She closed her eyes and focused on her breathing, trying to calm the storm inside her. Found Lily and sat beside her. She squeezed Lily's hand and told her to remember everything they had practiced together. She said that Lily was the most talented person she had ever met, and today was the day to show the world. Her words meant everything to Lily, who had felt so alone just moments before. Mrs. Blackwood appeared backstage with a clipboard in her hand. She announced that the concert would begin in 5 minutes. She looked at Lily and told her to get ready to go on stage first. There was a gleam of anticipation in her eyes, the look of someone waiting to watch a disaster unfold. Lily stood up and smoothed her simple white dress. She took a deep breath and walked toward the stage entrance. Her heart pounded so loud she could hear it in her ears. Her hands trembled slightly, but she forced them to be still. This was her moment, and she would face it with courage. The curtain opened, and the bright lights of the stage blinded her for a moment. She heard the audience go quiet, their whispers fading into silence. She could see hundreds of faces staring at her, some curious, some amused, some already judging her simple appearance. In the front row, Mr. sat with his pen ready, his expression unreadable. Lily walked to the grand piano and sat down on the bench. The instrument was even more beautiful up close, its keys perfectly white and black, waiting for her touch. She adjusted the bench to the right height and placed her small fingers on the keys. The hall was completely silent, waiting. For a moment, Lily felt the weight of everything pressing down on her. She thought about Mrs. Blackwood, watching from the side with her cruel smile. She thought about all the months of struggle, the tears she had hidden, the doubts she had fought. She thought about her cardboard piano at home, where this journey had begun. Then something changed inside her. The fear melted away, replaced by something warm and powerful. She remembered why she loved music. She remembered the joy she felt when she first heard a piano song on the old radio. She remembered the dreams that had kept her going through every difficulty. Her fingers began to move across the keys, and the first notes of Chopin's ballade filled the hall. The sound was clear and pure, rising up to the high ceiling and touching every person in the room. Lily was no longer thinking about the notes or the technique. She was simply letting the music flow through her, telling a story that words could never express. The audience sat frozen in their seats. What they were hearing was not what they had expected. This was not the clumsy performance of a beginner struggling with a piece too difficult for her. This was something else entirely. This was the sound of raw, natural talent that came once in a generation. Mr. leaned forward in his seat, his pen forgotten in his hand. His eyes widened as he watched the little girl's fingers dance across the keys with grace and emotion that her age and experience. He had heard thousands of pianists in his career, and he knew immediately that he was witnessing something extraordinary. The music filled every corner of the hall, wrapping around the audience like a warm embrace. Some people had tears in their eyes without knowing why. Others felt their hearts racing with emotions they could not name. The power of Lily's playing was unlike anything they had ever experienced. Backstage, the other students watched through a gap in the curtain. Their faces showed shock and disbelief, was crying silently, overwhelmed with joy for her friend. Mrs. Blackwood stood perfectly still, her face pale and her hands shaking. This was not supposed to happen. This was not part of her plan. Lily continued to play, lost in the music that had become her world. She did not see the tears or the shocked faces. She did not feel the spotlight or hear the silence. She only felt the music, flowing through her like a river of light, carrying her to a place where nothing else mattered. The piece built to its climax, the notes crashing like waves against rocks, then pulling back into moments of tender beauty. Lily's small body swayed with the rhythm, her eyes closed, her spirit flying free. She had become the music, and the music had become her. The final notes of Chopin's ballade faded into the air, leaving a silence so complete that you could hear a pin drop. Lily sat motionless at the piano, her fingers still resting on the keys, her eyes slowly opening as if waking from a beautiful dream. For a moment, she did not know where she was. Then reality came rushing back. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. Lily's heart sank, thinking she had failed. She began to stand, ready to walk off the stage in shame. But before she could move, something incredible happened. Mr. Alexander rose from his seat and began to clap. The sound of his applause broke the spell that had held the audience captive. One by one, others stood and joined in. Within seconds, the entire hall was on its feet, clapping and cheering with an enthusiasm that shook the walls. The thunder of applause rolled over Lily like a wave, and she stood there, unable to believe what was happening. In the audience, Lily's mother was sobbing openly, her hands pressed to her heart. The people around her were staring at her now with different eyes. This was no longer the poor woman in simple clothes. This was the mother of a miracle. Mr. was shouting something that Lily could not hear over the noise. His usually calm face was alive with excitement. He turned to the people around him, gesturing toward the stage, unable to contain his amazement. In his 40 years as a music critic, he had never witnessed anything like this. Mrs. Blackwood stood frozen at the side of the stage. Her face had gone completely white, and her hands were trembling at her sides. The plan that was supposed to destroy Lily had done the exact opposite. Instead of humiliation, she had given the girl a chance to shine brighter than any star. The applause continued for several minutes before finally dying down. People returned to their seats, but the atmosphere in the hall had completely changed. There was an electric excitement in the air, a feeling that something historic had just occurred. Mr. left his seat and walked directly to the stage. This was highly unusual behavior for such a distinguished critic, but he did not care about protocol anymore. He climbed the steps and approached Lily, who stood nervously by the piano. He bent down to her level and looked into her eyes with warmth and wonder. He asked Lily how long she had been playing the piano. She answered honestly that she had only been learning for a few months at this school. His eyebrows rose in disbelief. He asked who had taught her to play with such emotion and depth. She told him about her cardboard piano at home and how she used to practice for hours, listening to music on the radio and imagining herself playing. Mr. shook his head slowly, a smile spreading across his face. He told Lily that in all his years of searching for young talent, he had never found anyone like her. He said she had a gift that could not be taught, a connection to music that was pure and natural. He asked if she would like to study at the National Music Conservatory in the city, the finest music school in the country. Lily could not believe what she was hearing. She looked toward the audience, searching for her mother's face. When she found it, she saw tears of joy streaming down her mother's cheeks. Her mother nodded, giving her permission to accept this unbelievable offer. The rest of the concert continued, but it was clear that nothing could match what had happened at the beginning. The wealthy students performed their carefully rehearsed pieces, but the audience's minds were elsewhere. They kept glancing at Lily, who had returned to her seat backstage, trying to understand how this little girl had done the impossible. Rushed to Lily as soon as she could and hugged her tightly. She told Lily that she had always known this would happen. She said that real talent could never be hidden, no matter how hard some people tried to bury it. The two girls held each other, both crying and laughing at the same time. The other students approached Lily one by one, offering congratulations and apologies. Many of them admitted that they had been wrong to judge her. They had believed what Mrs. Blackwood said about poor children not belonging in the world of music. Now they understood that talent knew no boundaries of wealth or class. When the concert finally ended, Mr. made an announcement to the audience. He said that he had come to Riverside expecting to find promising students, but instead he had discovered a true prodigy. He declared that Lily was the most naturally gifted young pianist he had ever encountered, and he would personally sponsor her education at the National Music Conservatory. The audience erupted in applause once again. Lily's mother was invited to the stage, and she walked up with shaking legs, hardly able to believe what was happening. She embraced her daughter, and together they faced the cheering crowd. All those years of sacrifice, all those nights of worry, had led to this beautiful moment. Reporters who had come to cover the concert rushed to take pictures and ask questions. By the next morning, Lily's story would be in newspapers across the country. The tale of the little girl who practiced on cardboard and amazed a famous critic would inspire millions of people who had ever been told they were not good enough. But amid all the celebration, one person was notably absent. Mrs. Blackwood had disappeared from the hall as soon as the announcement was made. She had retreated to her office, locking the door behind her. Inside, she sat in darkness, confronting the ruins of her cruelty. For 25 years, she had believed that she was protecting the purity of music by keeping out those she considered unworthy. She had convinced herself that her prejudice was justified, that poor children simply lacked the breeding for true artistry. But Lily had shattered that belief into a million pieces. The hours passed, and the hall emptied. The flowers began to wilt under the dying lights, and the cleaners came to restore order. But the memory of what had happened that night would never fade. It had become a part of Riverside's history, a story that would be told and retold for generations. Lily and her mother walked home that night, hand in hand, under a sky full of stars. Neither of them spoke much. Words seemed too small for what they were feeling. Their small apartment, which had always seemed so cramped and poor, now felt like the most beautiful place in the world. On the kitchen table, the old cardboard piano still sat where Lily had left it that morning. She walked over and touched its paper keys gently, remembering all the hours she had spent dreaming at this simple creation. It had been her first instrument, her faithful companion through lonely times. She would keep it forever as a reminder of where she started. Her mother made hot chocolate, and they sat together at the table, sipping slowly and looking at each other with grateful smiles. They talked about the future, about the opportunities that now lay ahead. The National Music Conservatory in the city seemed like another world, but they would face it together. News of Lily's performance spread quickly through the small town of Riverside. By the next day, Everyone knew the story. Some people were amazed and inspired, while others were forced to examine their own prejudices. The little girl they had overlooked and dismissed had turned out to be extraordinary. The music school was never the same after that night. Parents began to question why Mrs. Blackwood was still teaching there. They demanded to know how she had treated Lily and other students from less privileged backgrounds. An investigation was launched into her behavior over the years. Former students came forward with their own stories of being humiliated and discriminated against by Mrs. Blackwood. Some of them had given up on music entirely because of her cruelty. The picture that emerged was of a teacher who had damaged countless young dreams, all because she could not see beyond her own bitter prejudices. The school board held emergency meetings to discuss what should be done. Letters poured in from parents and community members, demanding change. The scandal grew larger with each passing day, threatening to engulf the entire institution. Through all of this, Lily focused on preparing for her new journey. Mr. had arranged for her to visit the National Music Conservatory the following month. She would meet the teachers, see the facilities, and begin the next chapter of her musical education. The cardboard piano had served its purpose. Now it was time for real pianos and real dreams. Her mother began looking for jobs in the city, knowing they would need to move for Lily's education. It was scary to think about leaving everything they knew, but it was also exciting. Their lives had been transformed in a single night, and nothing would ever be the same again. The winter turned colder, but inside their small apartment, warmth glowed from the hope of a bright future. Lily practiced every day, now on a real keyboard that Mr. had sent as a gift. The sound filled their home with beauty, reminding them that miracles were possible for those who never stopped believing. The investigation into Mrs. Blackwood's conduct grew more serious with each passing week. The school board hired an independent team to interview current and former students, staff members, and parents. The stories they collected painted a disturbing picture of years of discrimination and emotional abuse. Former students about being ridiculed for their family's financial status. Janitors and cleaners spoke of witnessing Mrs. Blackwood's cruel treatment of children who did not fit her idea of proper musical background. Parents shared letters and emails showing how the teacher had discouraged them from enrolling their children. The investigation revealed that Mrs. Blackwood had been systematically pushing out students from lower-income families for over 2 decades. She would give them impossible assignments, mock them in front of classmates, and create a hostile environment until they quit. The school's high reputation had been built on excluding those she deemed unworthy. Mrs. Blackwood was called before the school board to answer for her actions. She arrived dressed in her finest clothes, still carrying herself with the pride that had always defined her. But her eyes showed fear that she could not hide. The walls of her world were crumbling around her. The hearing was held in a large conference room at the town hall. Community members filled the seats, eager to witness justice being served. Lily's mother was there, along with family and many others whose lives had been touched by this story. The chairman of the school board read out the charges against Mrs. Blackwood. They included creating a discriminatory learning environment, emotional abuse of students, and violation of the school's equal opportunity policies. Each charge was supported by testimony and evidence gathered during the investigation. Mrs. Blackwood was given a chance to defend herself. She stood and spoke in a voice that tried to sound confident but cracked with emotion. She claimed that she had only been trying to maintain high standards. She argued that not every child was suited for serious musical education. She insisted that her methods, while strict, had produced excellent results. But her defense crumbled when recordings were played of her making cruel comments to students. Someone had secretly recorded her telling Lily that children who practiced on cardboard would never understand real music. The room fell silent as her own words condemned her. Former students who had been driven away by Mrs. Blackwood spoke about the damage she had caused. A young man named David told how he had loved piano as a child, but quit after she mocked his family for not being able to afford lessons with a private tutor. A woman named Sarah described how she still had nightmares about being humiliated in front of her classmates. The testimony continued for hours, each story adding to the weight of evidence against the once respected teacher. By the end, even those who had defended Mrs. Blackwood could no longer deny what she had done. Her career at the music school was finished. The school board voted unanimously to terminate Mrs. Blackwood's employment. She was also banned from teaching at any school in the region. As she left the hearing room, she walked past the same people she had looked down upon for so many years. Now they looked at her with a mixture of pity and vindication. News of the verdict spread quickly through Riverside and beyond. Newspapers published articles about the case, using it as an example of how prejudice could hide behind institutional walls. The story became a symbol of the need for fairness and equality in education. Lily watched these events from a distance, preparing for her upcoming visit to the National Music Conservatory. She felt no joy in Mrs. Blackwood's downfall. Instead, she felt a strange sadness for a woman whose bitterness had consumed her life. She wondered what had happened to make Mrs. Blackwood so cruel and whether things could have been different. Her mother told her that some people were hurt so deeply by life that they could only spread pain to others. She said that Mrs. Blackwood's injury, which had ended her own musical career, had turned into a wound that never healed. Instead of finding new purpose, she had chosen to punish those who reminded her of what she had lost. The day finally came for Lily and her mother to travel to the city. They packed their belongings into 2 small suitcases, which contained everything they owned. The journey by bus took several hours, and Lily spent the time looking out the window at a world that was larger and more exciting than anything she had known. The National Music Conservatory was located in the heart of the city, a magnificent building with tall columns and beautiful architecture. When Lily saw it for the first time, she felt a flutter of nervousness mixed with wonder. This was where the greatest musicians in the country had studied, and now she would be one of them. Mr. met them at the entrance and gave them a tour of the facilities. There were practice rooms with beautiful pianos, concert halls with perfect acoustics, and libraries filled with music from every era and tradition. Students walked through the halls carrying instruments, their faces showing the same passion for music that Lily felt in her heart. The teachers at the conservatory gathered to meet Lily. They had heard about her remarkable performance and wanted to see her talent for themselves. One by one, they asked her to play different pieces, testing her skills and understanding. Lily played with the same pure emotion that had amazed the audience at Riverside. After the audition, the teachers gathered to discuss what they had witnessed. Their verdict was unanimous. Lily was offered a full scholarship to the National Music Conservatory, covering all her expenses for tuition, housing, and even a small allowance for living costs. It was more than Lily or her mother had ever dared to hope for. That night they stayed in a small hotel near the conservatory. The room was simple but clean, and to Lily it felt like a palace. She sat by the window, looking at the city lights that sparkled like 1,000,000 stars on Earth. Her life had changed so completely that she sometimes wondered if she was dreaming. Her mother joined her at the window and put an arm around her shoulders. She reminded Lily that this was just the beginning. The real work would start when school began. There would be challenges and difficulties ahead, moments when she would doubt herself and want to give up. But as long as she remembered who she was and where she came from, she would always find her way. They returned to Riverside to pack up their apartment and say goodbye to the people who had supported them. Mr. Wilson, the old janitor from the music school, came to see them off. He gave Lily a small gift wrapped in newspaper. Inside was an old tuning fork that had belonged to him when he worked at the famous concert hall. He said it would always remind her to stay true to herself. Also came to say goodbye, along with her family. The The two girls promised to write to each other and stay friends no matter how far apart they were. His father offered to help with anything they might need in the city, a gesture that showed how much things had changed since that first day when Lily walked into the music school. The farewell was bittersweet. Riverside had been their home, the place where Lily had faced her greatest challenge and discovered her true potential. But it was also the place where she had been judged and mistreated. Leaving was both an ending and a beginning. On their last night in the apartment, Lily took out her cardboard piano and played an imaginary melody one final time. Her fingers moved across the paper keys that had been her first teacher, her silent companion through lonely hours of practice. Tomorrow, she would enter a world of real pianos and grand concert halls, but this simple piece of cardboard would always have a place in her heart. The moving truck came early the next morning. It was a small truck because they did not have many things to move, but what they carried with them was worth more than any material possession. They carried hope, courage, and the unshakable belief that dreams could come true. As the truck pulled away from Riverside, Lily looked back at the town that had shaped her. The music school stood in the distance, its walls no longer holding any power over her. She had walked through those doors as a frightened little girl with cardboard dreams. Now she was leaving as someone who had shown the world what determination and talent could achieve. The road ahead stretched long and unknown, but Lily was ready. She had faced the worst that cruelty could offer and had emerged stronger. The music inside her would continue to grow, reaching heights that nobody could yet imagine. Her journey was just beginning, and the best was yet to come. Life at the National Music Conservatory was both wonderful and challenging for Lily. The small apartment she shared with her mother was located in a quiet neighborhood near the school, surrounded by trees and small shops that reminded them of home. Every morning, she would wake up early and walk to the conservatory, passing musicians practicing in the park and street performers sharing their art with. The other students at the conservatory came from all over the country and even from foreign lands. Some came from wealthy families with generations of musical tradition. Others, like Lily, had fought against difficult circumstances to pursue their passion. This diversity created a community where talent was the only measure of worth. Lily's main teacher was Professor, a renowned pianist from Germany who had performed in the greatest concert halls of Europe. He was strict but fair, demanding excellence while nurturing each student's unique voice. When he first heard Lily play, he sat in silence for a long moment before speaking. Professor told Lily that she possessed something that could not be taught. He said that technical skill could be learned through practice, but the ability to touch people's hearts with music was a gift that came from the soul. His job, he explained, was to help her develop her technique while preserving the natural beauty of her expression. The training was rigorous. Lily practiced for 6 to 8 hours every day, working on scales and increasingly complex pieces. Her fingers grew stronger and more agile, capable of executing passages that once seemed impossible. But Professor always reminded her that technique was a servant to emotion, not a master. Meanwhile, news of Lily's story continued to spread across the country. Journalists came to interview her, and her photo appeared in magazines alongside articles about overcoming adversity. A famous documentary filmmaker approached her mother about making a film about their journey from poverty to the conservatory. Lily was uncomfortable with all the attention. She had never wanted to be famous. She just wanted to play music. But Mr., who had become like a guardian angel to her family, explained that her story was giving hope to millions of children who had been told they could not succeed. Her fame was not about her ego, but about inspiring others. The months passed quickly, filled with lessons, practice sessions, and small performances at the conservatory. Lily made friends with students from different backgrounds, learning about their cultures and sharing her own story. She discovered that music was a language that connected people across all barriers of nationality, class, and circumstance. Her closest friend at the conservatory was a boy named from a small farming community. Like Lily, he had grown up without access to expensive training, but had taught himself to play violin by listening to recordings and practicing on an old instrument left behind by his grandfather. They understood each other in ways that others could not. And Lily would often practice together in one of the smaller rehearsal rooms. Their instruments blended beautifully, creating harmonies that made other students stop and listen. Professor noticed their chemistry and suggested they consider performing duets at future concerts. The first year at the conservatory ended with a showcase where each student performed for an audience of faculty, families, and music industry representatives. Lily was nervous, remembering the last time she had performed in front of a crowd. But this time, she was not being set up for failure. This time, she was among friends and supporters who genuinely wanted her to succeed. She chose to play a piece by one that she felt deeply connected to. As she sat at the grand piano in the beautiful concert hall, she closed her eyes and let herself drift back to the beginning of her journey. She thought of the cardboard piano, the cold winter mornings, and the cruel words of Mrs. Blackwood. Then she opened her eyes and began to play. The music flowed from her fingers like water from a spring, pure and unstoppable. The audience sat spellbound, drawn into the emotional landscape she created with each note. When the final chord faded into silence, the applause that followed was genuine and heartfelt. Professor embraced her after the performance, something he rarely did with his students. He told her that she had exceeded his expectations and that he looked forward to guiding her to even greater heights. His words filled her with determination to work even harder in the years ahead. Summer came, and with it a vacation from the intense schedule of the conservatory. Lily and her mother returned to Riverside to visit their old friends and see how things had changed. The music school now had a new director, a young woman dedicated to making music education accessible to all children regardless of their background. The school had also established a scholarship program named after Lily, providing opportunities for talented children from low-income families. When Lily visited the school, she was treated as a hero by the new students. They asked her questions and begged her to play for them, which she did with pleasure. One day during her visit, she received an unexpected letter. It was from Mrs. Blackwood, who had moved to a different town after losing her job. The letter was long and difficult to read, filled with attempts at explanation that sometimes veered into excuses. But at its heart was something that surprised Lily. It was an apology. Mrs. Blackwood wrote that losing her career had forced her to confront herself in ways she had avoided for decades. She acknowledged that she had been cruel and wrong, that her own pain had blinded her to the gifts of children she was supposed to nurture. She asked for nothing in return for her apology, expecting that Lily would probably throw the letter away unread. Lily sat with the letter for a long time, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Part of her wanted to hate Mrs. Blackwood, to hold onto the anger that had fueled her through difficult times. But another part of her understood that carrying hatred was a burden she did not need. She decided to write back. Her letter was short and simple. She told Mrs. Blackwood that she accepted the apology and hoped that she would find peace. She said that the pain of the past had made her stronger, but she did not wish to carry it into the future. She wished Mrs. Blackwood well and signed her name. Her mother was surprised when she learned about the exchange. She asked Lily if she was sure about forgiving someone who had caused so much harm. Lily replied that forgiveness was not about saying what happened was okay. It was about freeing herself from the prison of resentment so she could move forward without weight holding her back. The summer ended, and Lily returned to the conservatory for her second year of studies. The courses became more advanced, and the expectations grew higher. She was now being prepared not just as a student but as a future professional musician who would one day perform on world stages. Professor introduced her to the art of interpretation, teaching her how different pianists could play the same piece in entirely different ways. He showed her recordings of legendary performers and analyzed what made each one unique. He encouraged her to find her own voice within the traditions of classical music. Lily spent hours studying these recordings, amazed by the variety of expression possible within a single composition. She began to experiment with her own interpretations, bringing elements of her personal experience into the music. The struggle and triumph of her journey began to color her performances in ways that audiences found deeply moving. News came that Mr. was organizing a charity concert to raise money for music education in underprivileged communities. He wanted Lily to be the featured performer, giving her first major public concert since the night that changed her life. The event would be held in the Grand Concert Hall of the city, with tickets available to people from all walks of life. Lily was both honored and terrified by the invitation. This would be her biggest stage yet, with hundreds of people watching and judging. But she also understood the importance of the cause and the opportunity to inspire others who had faced obstacles similar to hers. She began preparing for the concert with intensity that impressed even Professor. Every night, after her regular practice, she would stay late in the rehearsal room, perfecting every phrase and gesture. Would sometimes join her, offering encouragement and playing violin pieces to help her relax. As the date of the concert approached, publicity grew. Posters appeared throughout the city, featuring Lily's photo and the story of her remarkable rise from poverty to prominence. Television programs invited her for interviews, and newspapers published articles about the upcoming event. The little girl who had practiced on cardboard was becoming a symbol of hope for an entire nation. The night of the charity concert arrived under a sky filled with autumn stars. The Grand Concert Hall was magnificent, with golden chandeliers hanging from ceilings painted with scenes of angels and clouds. Red velvet curtains framed the stage, and the polished floor reflected the lights like a dark mirror. People of all backgrounds filled the seats, from wealthy donors in evening gowns to families from modest neighborhoods who had received free tickets. Mr. had insisted that the concert be accessible to everyone, believing that music belonged to all people regardless of their financial status. Backstage, Lily sat in a quiet dressing room, wearing a beautiful blue dress that her mother had sewn herself. She looked at her reflection in the mirror, barely recognizing the young woman staring back at her. So much had changed since the days of the cardboard piano, yet she was still the same girl who loved music more than anything. Her mother sat beside her, holding her hand just as she had before that first terrifying performance in Riverside. She reminded Lily of how far they had come together, through poverty and struggle, through cruelty and triumph. She told her daughter that no matter what happened on stage tonight, she had already succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. Professor came to wish her luck, bringing with him the confidence that only years of experience could provide. He told Lily that she was ready, that all her training and natural talent had prepared her for this moment. He reminded her to trust the music and let it carry her where it needed to go. Also came by, bringing a small bouquet of flowers he had bought with his saved allowance. He was nervous for her, knowing how much this performance meant, but he also believed in her completely, having witnessed her dedication and growth over the past 2 years. He hugged her tightly and told her to break a leg. The time came for Lily to take the stage. She walked through the corridor behind the curtain, hearing the murmur of the audience on the other side. Her heart pounded in her chest, but it was a different kind of fear than before. This time, she was surrounded by love and support. This time, she was not fighting against the world but playing for it. The concert hall fell silent as the lights dimmed. A spotlight illuminated the grand piano on center stage, its black surface gleaming under the warm glow. Lily walked out from the wings, her footsteps echoing in the hushed space. The audience applauded warmly, welcoming her with genuine enthusiasm. She sat at the piano and adjusted the bench, taking a moment to feel the keys under her fingers. The instrument was beautiful, responsive to the slightest touch. She looked out at the sea of faces, visible only as shadows in the darkness beyond the spotlight. Somewhere out there, her mother was watching. Mister was watching. Everyone who believed in her was watching. Lily began with a piece by Chopin, different from the ballade she had played in Riverside, but equally beautiful and challenging. The notes flowed from her fingers with confidence and grace, filling the concert hall with sound that seemed to breathe and pulse with life. The audience was immediately captivated, drawn into the world she created. She played piece after piece, each one showcasing different aspects of her artistry. There were moments of thundering power that made the air vibrate, and moments of delicate tenderness that brought tears to eyes. She played compositions by and contemporary composers whose work she had discovered at the conservatory. Between pieces, she spoke briefly to the audience, sharing the story of her journey and the importance of music education for children who might not otherwise have opportunities. Her words were simple and sincere, touching hearts as deeply as her music. People in the audience nodded and wiped their eyes, recognizing something universal in her experience. The climax of the concert was a performance of piano concerto, accompanied by a small orchestra that Mr. had assembled for the occasion. This was the first time Lily had performed with an orchestra, and the experience was overwhelming. The combined sound surrounded her, lifted her, carried her to heights she had never reached before. As the final movement built toward its conclusion, Lily felt something shift inside her. The boundary between herself and the music dissolved completely. She was no longer playing the piano, she was becoming the music itself. Her body moved, her fingers flew, and the sound that emerged was something beyond technique or training. It was pure expression of the human spirit. The concerto ended with a massive chord that seemed to shake the very foundations of the concert hall. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then the audience exploded into applause, everyone rising to their feet in a standing ovation that continued for several minutes. Lily stood and bowed, overwhelmed by the response. She looked toward the section where her mother was sitting and saw her on her feet, tears streaming down her face. Mr. was beside her, applauding with hands that had discovered her and changed her life forever. After the concert, a reception was held where donors and supporters could meet Lily personally. She shook hundreds of hands and received countless congratulations, always remembering to thank people for supporting music education. Her humility impressed everyone who met her, surprised that someone so talented could remain so grounded. Among the guests was a representative from an international music agency. He introduced himself and told Lily that his organization was interested in managing her career. They saw enormous potential in her, not just as a performer, but as an ambassador for music education worldwide. He gave her his card and asked her to contact him when she was ready. Lily tucked the card into her dress pocket, not quite sure what to make of the offer. The world of professional music seemed so far from the life she had known, but she also understood that this was the natural next step in her journey, the opportunity to reach even more people with her music. The night ended late, with Lily and her mother finally returning to their small apartment near the conservatory. They were too excited to sleep, so they sat at the kitchen table drinking tea and talking about everything that had happened. The charity concert had raised more money than anyone expected, enough to provide music lessons for hundreds of children in need. The next morning, Lily woke to find dozens of messages waiting for her. News of her performance had spread through social media and traditional press. Critics praised her artistry, comparing her to legendary pianists of the past. Her name was being mentioned alongside musicians she had admired since childhood. Professor called to congratulate her and discuss what this success meant for her future. He reminded her that fame was a tool, not a goal, and that she must use it wisely. He suggested she take time to consider the agency's offer carefully, weighing the benefits and responsibilities of a professional career. Letters began arriving from children and families around the world, people who had seen news coverage of Lily's story and wanted to share their own struggles and dreams. A boy from a village in India wrote about teaching himself piano on a keyboard made of paper, just like Lily had done. A girl from Brazil described overcoming discrimination to pursue her passion for music. Each letter touched Lily's heart and strengthened her sense of purpose. She realized that her success was not just personal, but represented something larger. She was proof that talent and hard work could overcome poverty and prejudice, that dreams were worth pursuing no matter how impossible they seemed. The months following the concert brought many changes. Lily signed with the International Music Agency, which began arranging performances in cities around the world. She was invited to play at famous concert halls where the greatest musicians in history had performed. Each invitation was both an honor and a reminder of how far she had traveled from her humble beginnings. Her mother accompanied her on most of these trips, experiencing a world they had only dreamed about. They stayed in beautiful hotels, were treated as honored guests, and met fascinating people from every corner of the globe. But no matter how glamorous their surroundings became, they never forgot where they came from. Lily made a commitment to visit schools and community centers wherever she performed. She would play for children who had never heard live classical music and tell them about her own journey. She showed them her cardboard piano, which she still carried with her as a reminder of her roots. The children's eyes would light up with hope, seeing in her the possibility of their own dreams coming true. The world was beginning to recognize that this young pianist was something special, not just for her talent but for what she represented. She was becoming a voice for millions who had been told they did not belong, proof that greatness could emerge from the most unlikely places. 3 years passed since Lily's debut concert, years filled with performances, travel, and growth that transformed her from a prodigy into a mature artist. She was now 16, taller and more confident, but still carrying the same gentle spirit that had defined her since childhood. Her career had taken her to stages across every continent. She had played in the great concert halls of Vienna, London, Tokyo, and Sydney. Critics consistently praised her unique ability to combine technical brilliance with emotional depth, calling her one of the most promising talents of her generation. But fame brought challenges that Lily had never anticipated. The constant travel was exhausting, taking her away from friends and the stability of normal life. Some people tried to take advantage of her success, seeing her as a source of money rather than as a person. The pressure of public expectations sometimes felt overwhelming. During a tour in Europe, Lily began to feel disconnected from the joy that had once made music her greatest love. The schedule was brutal, with performances almost every night in different cities. She barely had time to eat or sleep properly, let alone practice with the focus she needed. Her playing became mechanical, losing the spark that had made her special. Mr. noticed the change and became concerned. During a dinner in Paris, he asked Lily directly if something was wrong. She tried to smile and say everything was fine, but the tears that followed told a different story. She confessed that she felt lost, that the music that had once saved her was now feeling like a prison. They talked for hours that night, about the challenges of fame and the importance of staying connected to one's original purpose. Mr. shared stories from his own career, times when he too had felt overwhelmed by the demands of the music world. He reminded her that success was not about the number of performances, but about the quality of connection with audiences. The following week, Lily made a decision that surprised many people in the industry. She canceled the remainder of her European tour and returned home to spend time with her mother. The media speculated about health problems or personal scandals, but the truth was simpler. She needed to rest and rediscover herself. Her mother welcomed her with open arms and no questions. They spent quiet days together, cooking simple meals and taking walks in the park. Lily did not touch a piano for the first month, allowing her mind and body to heal from years of constant pressure. During this period, she received a letter that would change her perspective forever. It came from a hospital in a nearby city, written by the parents of a young boy named Tommy who was battling a serious illness. Tommy had seen Lily perform on television and had become obsessed with her music. It was the only thing that brought him comfort during painful treatments. The parents asked if there was any chance Lily could visit their son, knowing it was probably impossible given her fame and busy schedule. But Lily read the letter 3 times, each time feeling something stir in her heart. She called the hospital that same afternoon and arranged to visit the next day. Tommy was 10 years old, thin and pale from his treatments, but his eyes lit up like stars when Lily walked into his hospital room. He could not believe that his hero had actually come to see him. He had a small keyboard beside his bed, the same cheap model that hospitals sometimes provided for patients. Lily sat beside him and asked him to play something for her. Tommy was embarrassed, saying he was not very good. But with encouragement, he placed his small fingers on the keys and played a simple melody he had learned from watching videos online. His technique was rough, but there was something genuine in his playing that reminded Lily of herself at that age. She spent 3 hours with Tommy that day, playing duets on the small keyboard and telling him stories about her journey. She showed him her cardboard piano, which she had brought specifically for this visit. Tommy touched the paper keys with wonder, understanding that dreams could begin anywhere, even on a piece of cardboard. When she left the hospital, Lily felt something she had not felt in months. She felt purpose. The connection with Tommy had reminded her why she had started playing music in the first place. It was not about fame or success or performing in grand concert halls. It was about touching people's hearts and making their lives a little brighter. She began visiting Tommy regularly, watching as his health slowly improved over the following months. The doctor said that his positive attitude, boosted by Lily's visits, was helping his recovery. Music had become medicine, healing in ways that science alone could not explain. News of Lily's visits to the hospital spread, inspiring other musicians to volunteer their time for similar causes. A movement began, with performers of all genres offering to play for patients in hospitals, nursing homes, and shelters. Lily's example had shown that music's true power was not in concert halls, but in the hearts it could heal. After 6 months of rest and reflection, Lily felt ready to return to performing. But she approached her career differently now. She reduced her schedule, accepting only performances that felt meaningful and left time for rest and service. She established a foundation dedicated to bringing music to children in hospitals and communities. The music industry was surprised by her choices. Some managers and promoters criticized her for not maximizing her earning potential during her prime years. But Lily knew that money and fame were empty if they came at the cost of her soul. She had seen too many talented musicians burn out chasing success. Her return to the stage was marked by a concert that combined her professional career with her charitable work. It was held in a medium-sized venue, with half the tickets given free to families from low-income neighborhoods and children from hospitals. The other half were sold at premium prices, with all proceeds going to her foundation. The program for this concert included pieces that told the story of her journey, from the struggles of her childhood to the challenges of fame to her rediscovered purpose. She spoke to the audience between pieces, sharing insights about music, life, and the importance of staying true to oneself. The audience that night was unlike any she had played for before. Wealthy patrons sat beside children from shelters, united by the universal language of music. Tommy was there, now recovering well and sitting in the front row with his parents. When Lily spotted him, she smiled and gave a small wave that made him beam with joy. Her playing that night was different from her earlier performances. There was a maturity and depth that came from experience and suffering. The notes carried the weight of everything she had learned, transformed into sound that moved people in profound ways. Critics would later write that this concert marked Lily's true emergence as an artist. Among the audience was Mrs. Blackwood, who had traveled from the distant town where she now lived. She had followed Lily's career from afar, watching with a mixture of pride and regret. She had received Lily's letter of forgiveness years ago, but the weight of her past actions still pressed upon her conscience. During the intermission, Mrs. Blackwood approached Lily backstage. She looked older and smaller than before, her once proud bearing diminished by years of reflection and solitude. She told Lily that she had established a scholarship fund for underprivileged music students, funded by selling many of her possessions. It was her attempt at making amends. Lily listened quietly and then did something that surprised everyone watching. She embraced her former tormentor, holding her as Mrs. Blackwood wept on her shoulder. The hug lasted several minutes, releasing years of pain and resentment from both of them. When they separated, both women had tears in their eyes. Mrs. Blackwood thanked Lily for her grace and forgiveness. She said that watching Lily's success had forced her to confront the ugliness in herself and try to become better. She would never undo the harm she had caused, but she would spend the rest of her life trying to help others. The second half of the concert began with Lily playing Chopin's Ballade, the same piece that had started everything in Riverside. As the familiar notes filled the hall, memories flooded back to everyone who had been there at the beginning. The music told the story of a little girl who had been set up to fail, but instead had risen to heights nobody imagined. When the final note faded into silence, the audience rose as one in a standing ovation that seemed like it would never end. Lily stood at the piano, looking out at the faces of people whose lives had intersected with hers in countless ways. She had started with nothing but a cardboard piano and a dream. Now she stood at the peak of her art, ready for whatever came next. 10 years had passed since that first fateful day when a little girl with worn shoes and braided hair walked into the Riverside Music Academy. The world had changed in countless ways, and so had Lily, who was now a woman of 25 with a career that had touched millions of lives across the globe. She stood backstage at the world's most prestigious concert hall, preparing for the performance that would define the next chapter of her journey. Tonight, she would debut her own piano concerto, a piece she had composed over several years that told the story of her life through music. Every note contained memories of struggle and triumph, of cruelty overcome and love discovered. Her mother sat in a chair nearby, now older but still carrying the same strength and warmth that had sustained them through their darkest days. Her hair had turned gray at the temples, and lines of experience marked her face. But her eyes still shone with the same fierce belief in her daughter that had never wavered. They did not need to speak. So many words had passed between them over the years that silence now held more meaning than conversation. They simply sat together, drawing comfort from each other's presence as they had done since Lily was a child practicing on cardboard keys. Outside the dressing room, the concert hall buzzed with anticipation. This was the most sought-after ticket of the season, with people having traveled from around the world to witness the premiere. The audience included presidents and prime ministers, celebrities and ordinary citizens, all united by their desire to hear what Lily had created. Among them was Tommy, now a young man of 20, healthy and strong, pursuing his own career as a music therapist. Lily's visits during his illness had inspired him to dedicate his life to helping others through music. He sat beside his parents, who still remembered the day a famous pianist had walked into their son's hospital room and changed everything. Was there too, with her own family now. She had become a respected music teacher, influenced by her friendship with Lily to use education as a force for good rather than exclusion. Her students sat in a section she had reserved, eyes wide with excitement at attending their first major concert. Sat in the orchestra section, holding his violin and waiting to perform alongside Lily for the first time in years. Their friendship had deepened over time, though their careers had taken them in different directions. Tonight, They would reunite on stage for a piece that featured a violin and piano duet at its heart. Professor, now retired, had made the journey from his home in Germany to witness what he called the culmination of his teaching career. He had always believed that Lily would achieve greatness, but even he was amazed by how far she had traveled. He sat in the front row, ready to hear what his former student had created. Mr. sat beside the professor, his white hair gleaming under the lights. He had formally retired from music criticism years ago, but he could not miss this night. He had discovered Lily in a small-town concert hall, and watching her evolution had become the proudest achievement of his life. And there, in a quiet corner of the audience, sat Blackwood. She was old now, her hands no longer steady enough to play piano, her body weakened by time. But she had received a personal invitation from Lily to attend this premiere, an invitation that had brought tears to her eyes when she opened it. The years had transformed Mrs. Blackwood as completely as they had transformed Lily. Her scholarship fund had helped dozens of talented children from poor backgrounds pursue their musical dreams. She had spent her remaining years trying to undo the harm she had caused, knowing she could never fully succeed, but refusing to stop trying. The lights in the concert hall dimmed, and silence fell over the audience. Lily walked onto the stage, wearing a simple white dress that reminded those who knew her story of the outfit she had worn at her first performance. She moved with grace and confidence, her presence commanding attention without demanding it. She sat at the grand piano and looked out at the audience. Somewhere in that darkness were all the people who had shaped her journey, her mother who had sacrificed everything for her dreams, Mr. who had seen her talent when others saw only poverty, Professor who had refined her gifts into art, and who had offered friendship when she needed it most, Tommy, whose courage had reminded her of her purpose, and Mrs. Blackwood, whose cruelty had been the fire that forged her strength. The orchestra sat ready behind her, instruments poised, held his violin, waiting for the moment when their parts would intertwine. The conductor raised his baton, and the concert hall seemed to hold its breath. Lily placed her fingers on the keys and closed her eyes. For a moment, she was 8 years old again, sitting at a cardboard piano in a tiny apartment, dreaming of a future that seemed impossible. She could feel the paper under her fingers, hear the radio playing classical music in the background, sense her mother watching from the doorway with hope in her eyes. Then she opened her eyes and began to play. The first movement of her concerto was called Struggle. It depicted the hardship of her early years, the poverty and discrimination, the loneliness of being different. The music was dark and turbulent, with dissonant chords that resolved unexpectedly into moments of fragile beauty. The orchestra joined her, creating a wall of sound that pressed down like the weight of circumstance. The second movement was called Cruelty. It recreated the experience of being humiliated by Mrs. Blackwood, the laughter of classmates, the feeling of being judged unworthy. The piano played a haunting melody over a sparse accompaniment, vulnerable and exposed. Then a violin joined in, representing the friendship of, and the music began to transform. The third movement was called Triumph. It built from the themes of the earlier movements, transforming darkness into light. The music soared and danced, celebrating the victory of persistence over prejudice. The full orchestra played in glorious harmony with the piano, creating sound that filled every corner of the concert hall and lifted spirits high. The fourth movement was called Purpose, and it was here that Lily's composition showed its greatest depth. The music explored the challenges of fame, the loss of self, and the rediscovery of meaning through service to others. It was complex and nuanced, demanding close attention from listeners but rewarding them with profound emotional truth. The final movement was called Love. It was the simplest and most beautiful section of the concerto, a meditation on the connections that give life meaning. The piano played a gentle melody that the violin echoed, representing all the relationships that had sustained Lily through her journey. The orchestra provided a warm bed of harmony beneath, supporting and embracing the solo instruments. As the last notes faded into silence, no one moved. The entire audience seemed frozen in the spell of what they had experienced. Then, slowly, people began to rise from their seats. The applause started softly and grew into a thunderous ovation that shook the walls. Lily stood and bowed, her eyes glistening with tears. She looked at her mother, who was sobbing openly, and at Mr., whose face showed pure joy. She saw Professor nodding with satisfaction and grinning from his place in the orchestra. She saw Tommy wiping his eyes and hugging her students. And she saw Mrs. Blackwood standing in her corner of the audience, clapping with hands that trembled from age and emotion. Their eyes met across the vast space, and something passed between them that words could never express. It was forgiveness made complete, pain transformed into peace, a chapter finally closed. The ovation continued for 15 minutes before the audience finally allowed Lily to leave the stage. Backstage, she was immediately surrounded by family and friends, all wanting to embrace her and share the moment. Her mother held her longest, whispering words of love and pride that only the two of them would ever know. Later that night, after the celebrations had ended and the crowds had dispersed, Lily sat alone in her dressing room. The concert hall was empty and quiet now, echoing with the memory of music that had filled it hours before. She reached into her bag and pulled out her old cardboard piano, its paper keys worn and faded from years of being carried around the world. She placed it on her lap and ran her fingers across it one final time, hearing in her imagination all the melodies she had practiced on this simple creation. She thought about the journey from that small apartment in Riverside to this magnificent concert hall. She thought about all the people who had helped her along the way and all the obstacles she had overcome. She thought about the children around the world who were at this moment practicing on their own cardboard pianos, dreaming dreams that seemed impossible. She had proven that those dreams could come true. She had shown that talent and determination could overcome any circumstance. She had demonstrated that cruelty, no matter how powerful it seemed, could never defeat a spirit that refused to give up. The next morning, newspapers around the world would carry reviews praising her composition as a masterpiece. Her story would be taught in schools as an example of overcoming adversity. Her foundation would receive donations that would fund music education for generations to come. But in that quiet moment alone, none of that mattered. What mattered was the simple truth that a little girl who had been forced onto a stage to be humiliated had instead discovered her destiny. What was meant to break her had made her stronger. What was meant to end her dreams had helped them come true. Lily looked at her cardboard piano one last time, smiled, and whispered a thank you to the journey that had brought her here. Then she packed it carefully back into her bag, stood up, and walked out into the night, ready for whatever beautiful music tomorrow would bring.